This program is funded with a grant from the Pepsi-Cola Company. It began as a Christian gentlemen's club for young men who weren't quite gentlemen.
It's almost a prayer group that allows young men to find other pursuits other than gambling or drinking or women.
It became part of the nation's fabric.
Sports to the YMCA were meant to be active. That's why they invented basketball and volleyball.
To be able to come meet together with other young people under the YMCA banner, that was quite a thing at that time, behind the barbed wire.
For 150 years, the Young Men's Christian Association has shaped and been shaped by America.
The Y didn't lead marches, but everybody who led the marches was trained in the Y.
The YMCA gave me the opportunity to learn the game in a structured setting with coaches who cared about you.
Today, the YMCA is the largest not-for-profit organization in the country, offering more than 18 million members a place to work out, hang out, and find a helping hand.
The YMCA has lasted for 150 years for a definite reason, and that is they've been able to change along with America.
Osman is a 46-year-old Somalian immigrant. He's also the face of today's YMCA. In May 1996, Osman and his family were relocated from a refugee camp in Kenya to Houston, Texas. There, Osman was introduced to YMCA International Services, whose caseworkers help refugees navigate their new and unfamiliar world.
The YMCA must show this person how to use this stove, how to use the hot water, how to use everything.
Through the Y's cultural orientation program, Osman was shown how to interview for a job in the United States. He adapted so quickly to his new life that by the end of the year, the Y had offered him a job, helping other refugees through the confusing process of resettling in America.
I know what they need because I have been through this, you see. So I believe that I can help them better.
For the YMCA, Osman is a new character in a familiar story. Since 1851, the American Y has helped newcomers get their bearings in the big city. Back then, the migrants were white Protestant men, leaving the farm for the factory at the onset of the Industrial Revolution. Today, they're just as often immigrants like Osman, newly arrived in the U.S. in search of opportunity. It's just one example of how, over the past century and a half, the Y has managed to change with the times without ever losing its identity. The Young Men's Christian Association was founded in London in 1844 by a 20-year-old sales assistant in a dry goods store, George Williams. A recent arrival in the city, Williams was at once appalled by its horrific living conditions and attracted to its many temptations.
He's self-admitted a man of vice. He is swearing, he is drinking, he is carousing, and he knows that's not good for himself and for his spiritual health.
On June 6, 1844, Williams gathered a group of young men for prayer and Bible study in a room above the shop where he worked. With that, the YMCA was born.
It's a meeting group that allows young men to come together and celebrate and practice a version of Christianity that they thought was important.
George Williams' idea caught on quickly. Within a year, the Y was offering public lectures and hosting Sunday afternoon tea gatherings for new recruits.
It tried to provide a wholesome environment so that these young men who were now removed from their families and from the churches would not end up in taverns or in houses of ill repute.
In 1851, during a trip to London, a retired Boston sea captain named Thomas Sullivan heard about the YMCA. For Sullivan, who was equal parts adventurer and evangelist, the Y offered a way to set young men on the path to Christianity before they were corrupted by the city.
By the time he's 33, he's been shipwrecked off the coast of Antarctica. He's been attacked by pirates. He's made a fortune and lost it. And here he is in his 50s in Boston thinking, boy, there's got to be something I can do for my fellow sailors, seamen, all across the world.
On December 29, 1851, Sullivan and 6 friends held the first American YMCA meeting in the Old South Church in Boston. He introduced the organization as a social group that shall meet the young stranger as he enters our city, take him by the hand, and in every way throw around him good influences.
You have a young man who's probably a farmhand perhaps, or has one skill. He moves from the farm into the city. He doesn't have television to explain what the city's about, so he has to find a mechanism for survival, and one of them is the YMCA.
Sullivan's new organization proved a resounding success. Within just 3 years, nearly 50 YMCAs had opened in cities across the country. Members paid $1 a year, or $20 for a lifetime membership. Activities included prayer meetings, Bible classes, and religious lectures. Although each new Y was independent, with a constitution of its own, most chose to follow the rules established by Thomas Sullivan. Among these rules, young men who joined were required to be members of a Protestant church.
That didn't include Catholics, that didn't include any other religious factions outside of the Christianity. But from their standpoint, in their eyes, they were being inclusionary. They were bringing people together.
The YMCA was pretty positive that its values, what it was trying to promote, was good, was in the best interests of America, in the best interests of religion, in the best interests of the world.
As the YMCA flourished, meetings moved from churches and rented spaces into buildings of their own, the first of which was built in Baltimore in 1859. As the 19th century rolled on, the steam train followed the frontier westward and brought the YMCA with it. The Railroad Ys, as they were called, offered workers Bible classes, lectures, good meals, and hot showers.
Railroad barons essentially support the Y because it gives their employees something to do, other than these other things that obviously don't make a very productive worker in the morning.
The spread of the Railroad Ys highlighted the remarkable versatility of George Williams' creation. The YMCA was becoming many things to many people, and not just young white Protestant men. Women were admitted as members as early as 1859, though their numbers remained small until after World War II. Native Americans founded more than 24 Ys, including a Y which claimed relatives of Sitting Bull as members. By the late 1800s, some Ys were even beginning to encourage Catholics and Jews to participate, though not yet to join.
It goes out and it sets up educational programs for immigrants, Catholic and Jewish immigrants. The desire is to, quote-unquote, Americanize the immigrant.
With more than 6,000 members in over 40 countries, the YMCA had already become, in its first half-century, one of the most successful voluntary organizations in the world. But it was only just beginning to flex its muscles. The coming decades would reveal that it was exercise, not evangelism, that would weave the Y into the everyday lives of millions of Americans. America's Haven, the YMCA at 150, will continue in a moment. Before he became an Olympic gold medalist, an NBA champion, or a United States Senator, Bill Bradley was just a scrawny kid shooting hoops at the local Y.
I began playing basketball in a YMCA in Crystal City, Missouri. Every Saturday morning at 9 o'clock, fourth graders would come to the local high school gym where we would play, and that was my first competition.
Bradley always stood head and shoulders above his teammates, but height alone wasn't enough to send him on the path to basketball stardom.
The YMCA gave me the opportunity to learn the game in a structured setting with coaches who cared about you.
Today, Bill Bradley's legendary career is immortalized here at the Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, Massachusetts. The museum is a shrine to America's most popular team sport. And the best seat in the house belongs to the man who started it all, the most influential YMCA instructor in history, James Naismith. In 1891, Naismith was a first-year phys ed teacher at the YMCA Training College in Springfield. Though the Y would go on to build more than 20 colleges, Springfield was its flagship, the only school in the country devoted to physical education instruction. Its teachers included such pioneering sports figures as college football legends Amos Alonzo Stagg and Newt Rockne.
A huge proportion of college coaches and physical educators in the early part of the 20th century were graduates of Springfield College. I think you can really say that it had a huge impact on American education.
That winter, Naismith was assigned an especially tough class, a rough-and-tumble group of young men bored with the school's usual slate of indoor activities, tumbling, leapfrog, and a game called Drop the Handkerchief. Naismith's boss, athletic director Luther Gulick, challenged him to come up with a new game, one that would capture the students' interest and keep them fit through the long winter months.
The original purpose of the game was to give unruly students something to do that was organized that they could put their energies into and therefore would be less unruly.
But Gulick also had a higher purpose in mind, a sport that would reinforce the YMCA's values, producing better young men, not just better athletes.
He didn't want a game that was solitary, like individual exercise. He didn't want a game that was too rough and tumble, that would encourage violent tendencies in people. He wanted a game that would promote teamwork and would promote what he felt was Christian character.
Gulick's views were shaped by a new movement that had only recently taken hold at the Y. It was called muscular Christianity, the belief that both a strong mind and a strong body were necessary for spiritual growth. Muscular Christianity dramatically transformed the Y, placing recreational exercise at the heart of the organization's mission. It even inspired Luther Gulick to design the Y's now familiar logo, an inverted red triangle symbolizing a balance between mind, body, and spirit. In the winter of 1891, Gulick challenged James Naismith to turn muscular Christianity into a new game. It took the 30-year-old Canadian a while to hit on a formula that was both spirited and safe.
And Naismith experiments with everything. He takes a little bit of soccer, a little bit of football, and he keeps putting them together, and people keep getting hurt.
Finally, he came up with something entirely new, a ball game built around passing, where tackling would be illegal, and points would be scored by tossing the ball up into a goal, which he thought would be a wooden box.
He's going around and asking the janitors and maintenance men, and one of them pulls out a peach basket. And Naismith says, well, that'll do, I guess.
Naismith took the peach basket and hung it from the overhead running track in the gym, 10 feet above the floor. He took another and nailed it up across the way. In mid-December 1891, two 9-man teams squared off against each other in history's first basketball game. The game lasted 30 minutes. The final score, 1-0. The YMCA's new game was an instant sensation. Naismith students became basketball evangelists, taking the game home with them on Christmas break, and eventually to other YMCAs when they graduated. Naismith himself only played twice. He was apparently too rough and fouled too often to be any good. He would, however, go on to become the first basketball coach at the University of Kansas. To this day, the inventor of basketball remains the only coach in the school's history with a losing record. Naismith's creation has come a long way since 1891. Backboards were added early on to keep spectators from swiping the ball. Then came foul shots, dribbling, and eventually the two-handed reverse jam. Yet while basketball may have quickly shed the gentlemanly qualities its inventor hoped to encourage, it's never lost its uniquely American spirit.
Balance between individuality and collective responsibility is really what the essence of America is in a fundamental sense. Baseball is a derivation of cricket, football is a derivation of rugby, but basketball is the true American game.
Basketball wasn't the only sport to be invented at the YMCA. In 1895, Naismith's friend William Morgan, a director at the Holyoke, Massachusetts Y, came up with a less strenuous game, a way of getting older, more sedentary men out onto the court. Morgan named his new sport mintonette, since it was based on a game brought from India called mitten. But that didn't last long.
Mintonette sounded far too ladylike for the manly folk at the YMCA, so the name was changed.
Today it's known by a more familiar name, volleyball.
Sports to the YMCA were meant to be active. That's why they invented basketball and volleyball, not so people could watch these sports from a distance while they drank beer and ate chips, but instead so that people could participate in those sports and learn the virtues of sportsmanship.
Along with inventing new sports, the YMCA also introduced revolutionary ways of teaching old ones. In 1909, George Corson, an instructor at the Detroit Y, offered the country's first group swimming lessons. Since then, millions of Americans have benefited from Corson's method, including triathlete Heidi Musser. Heidi learned to swim as a young girl here at the Leaning Tower Y in Niles, Illinois. In 1997, she met Mark Landeck, a personal trainer at the Y, who agreed to help get her in shape for competition. Less than a year later, in her hometown of Chicago, Heidi completed a sprint distance triathlon in just over 2 hours. It was a performance made all the more remarkable by the fact that Heidi has been blind since birth. In training and in races, her coach swims beside her, calling out directions. They ride in tandem, and when they run, they hold an elastic band between them. In September 1999, Heidi made history at the World Triathlon Championships in Montreal, where she became the first blind athlete to compete in an international triathlon on the same course as sighted athletes. By making play a serious pursuit, the YMCA helped change the way America and the world stayed fit. But in the first half of the 20th century, the terror of war would twice turn the YMCA's attention from the athletic field to the battlefield, where the Y would bring relief in ways large and small to millions of American servicemen. America's Haven, the YMCA at 150, will continue in a moment. It's Thursday night at the Fireside Inn near Syracuse, New York. Couples glide across the dance floor as the band plays when the Saints go marching in. Though everyone in the band loves playing this music, for 85-year-old trombone player Don Waffle, it has a very special significance. Waffle's love of music was fostered during the darkest days of his life, the days he spent in a German prisoner of war camp during World War II. On December 10, 1942, Waffle, a 26-year-old second lieutenant fighting in Tunisia, was captured by the Nazis. He ended up in Oflag 64, a German POW camp in Poland. There, he and his fellow prisoners were given the bare necessities: black bread, thin soup, and little else. The men were left to brood over their captivity.
Getting captured
is a blow to your psyche, it's a blow to your pride, it's a blow to your prestige. If you don't have something to do in a camp and all you can do is sit there and recriminate, in the middle of the night you're saying like, over and over again, how did I get here? How did I screw it up?
After a few months, though, that situation changed with the arrival of a volunteer from the YMCA. During the Second World War, the YMCA and the Red Cross were the primary international agencies allowed into the German POW camps. By mid-1943, Henry Soderberg, a Swedish representative of the YMCA, began to visit Oflag 64 regularly to take the POW's requests.
There were very few things that we wanted that they didn't provide. Tunnel digging equipment was not amongst them. They did not give those to us. But most everything else that we needed, they came.
To Don Waffle, the most important shipment was the one that brought sheet music and instruments. Back home, he'd been an amateur musician, and he'd even managed to acquire a trombone before being sent to Oflag 64. The YMCA outfitted his fellow prisoners with their own instruments, and soon this Nazi prison camp had a band of its own.
We're a long ways from home, and one of the things that could bring you back to normal was the hit songs of the time, and shut your eyes and you can think you're back there now. Or if we play a ballad, you could say, some guy sitting in the back row said, yeah, that was the favorite song that I danced with at the senior ball with my girl.
The music played by Don's band eventually made its way back to the American airwaves via recordings made by Representative Soderberg.
Let us now listen to some music produced in Oflag 64.
Bob Rankin and his swing orchestra will now play You Made Me Love You.
These broadcasts gave American audiences a sense of life in the camp and gave POWs a chance to send messages to loved ones.
This is Lieutenant Jack Carpenter from Cape Girardeau, Missouri. On behalf of the officers here from Missouri, I wish to send greetings to our friends and family. We think of you constantly and pray for our speedy reunion. Chin up and don't worry.
Throughout the war, the YMCA truck showed up periodically with stationery, sports equipment, and even supplies to create costumes and sets for dramatic performances.
They were maybe a little bit better than the senior play in high school, but some of the fellows took it real serious. We had a lot of fun taking guys and making them look like gals, and that was an art, and some fellows were a lot prettier than others.
Most importantly, the YMCA shipments reminded POWs that they had not been forgotten.
The Y was spending money that American citizens back home had given them. They made it very clear to us that these things that the Y and the Red Cross gave us was a reflection of the care of the people back home.
For the YMCA, reaching out to soldiers in need was nothing new. More than 5,000 Y volunteers had worked the battlefields, hospitals, and POW camps of the Civil War, including poet Walt Whitman.
They're actually performing surgery in some cases. They're providing nursing services. They're writing letters for the soldiers, many who, of course, are illiterate. They're providing stamps. But most importantly, I think, on the federal side, is they're listing the dead, and they're providing a list of all the fallen victims, which is so important to the families back home who probably have very little word as to what's happening to their young men.
The Y's work in the Civil War marked the beginning of its tradition of service on the battlefield. As soon as America entered World War I, the YMCA again leapt into action. At the time, the General Secretary of the National YMCA, John R. Mott, was an advisor to President Woodrow Wilson, who often looked to him for advice on international matters. On April 6, 1917, the very day the U.S. declared war, Mott sent a telegram to Wilson offering the full service of the YMCA. The Y's relief work would come to include everything from serving hot cocoa to soldiers to raising money for much-needed supplies.
The YMCA launches a fundraising drive under Mott's leadership, which eventually garners $200 million, more than $200 million.
Nearly 26,000 YMCA workers ran 1,500 canteens for the boys overseas, as well as 4,000 temporary huts for recreation and religious services. The Y volunteers, many of whom were women, coordinated massive shipments of preserves, socks, and even baseball bats. And when German U-boats made shipping goods across the Atlantic too risky, the Y built factories in Europe, including 44 cookie and candy plants to supply soldiers with sweets. But the Y's efforts were not without their critics. Unlike other relief groups, the Y charged soldiers for cigarettes, a fact that led to accusations of war profiteering. The Y's response was that they were simply trying to cover the enormous costs of their wide-ranging relief efforts, and that any money left over went into an educational fund for returning troops, the forerunner, it would turn out, of the GI Bill. Some soldiers also complained that the Y was mixing its religious mission with its relief mission.
The troops accused YMCA secretaries of trying to keep us from wine, women, and song. The YMCA, in the words of one leader, wanted to prevent World War I from becoming a venereal, disease-ridden festival.
Criticism of the Y led not just to changes in its war relief efforts, but to changes in the Y itself.
World War I has a very secularizing effect on the YMCA. They start out the war trying hard to win converts to Christ. By the end of the war, they're no longer doing that. And after the war, this continues.
Indeed, in 1933, the YMCA would officially abandon its Protestant evangelical mission. With the outbreak of World War II, the Y would once again send its volunteers to the front lines. Along with other volunteer groups, it helped found the United Service Organizations for War Relief Work, better known as the USO. The Y's humanitarian efforts in World War II would serve 6 million servicemen in more than 36 countries. And in 1946, YMCA General Secretary John Mott would be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. But the Y wasn't just working overseas. Its wartime assistance was also needed on the American home front. Sometimes even Y volunteers themselves were among those in need. In the wake of the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, anti-Japanese sentiment swept the United States. David Tatsuno, his wife, father, and children were among over 110,000 Japanese Americans on the West Coast who were forced to evacuate their homes and relocate to internment camps. After closing the family dry goods store in San Francisco, the Tatsunos found themselves confined to a camp in Topaz, Utah. Tatsuno was able to sneak an 8mm camera into the camp. These images provide a rare look behind the barbed wire.
Just imagine, you have to leave your home, you have to leave your pets behind, and then, and go into a barrack, it's boring, but they have to make the best of it.
Many of the Topaz internees, including David Tatsuno, had been members and employees of a YMCA in San Francisco, a Y started by Japanese Americans to provide services for neighborhood residents and new immigrants. Believing their best hope for eventual release was to show that they were model American citizens, the internees put their Y experience to work. They organized clubs and recreational activities for the other internees. They taught classes and established a YMCA camp.
To be able to come and meet together with other young people under the YMCA banner and have their own meeting, that was quite a thing at that time, behind the barbed wire. It meant a lot. It filled a big hole in their life.
Tatsuno believes that his years at the Y gave him an advantage over some of the others in the camp.
Sure, you could sit down and cry as you were behind barbed wire. We had to leave our homes and we had to leave our business, but that doesn't get you anyplace. But the Christian philosophy is to do what you can wherever you go, you see, no matter what. And that's what we try to do. And so the why, the philosophy helped.
In the years that followed World War II, the YMCA would find itself on the front lines of another battle, this one at home. The Y would come to play a paradoxical role in America's struggle to confront its greatest demon, racial inequality. America's haven, the YMCA at 150. will continue in a moment. As a civil rights crusader, U.S. Congressman, Ambassador to the United Nations, and two-term Mayor of Atlanta, Andrew Young has helped shape modern American history. And the YMCA helped shape Andrew Young.
The way we used to play football was just about as rough as anything I did. I mean, any beating I got in the civil rights movement.
As a child growing up in New Orleans, Young spent much of his time at the Dryads YMCA. There were no playgrounds in his neighborhood, no public resources at all for young black children.
When I went to the Y, it was like going to heaven. I learned to play table tennis, shoot pool, swim, play basketball, run, read, speak, almost everything, cuss. Clown. The YMCA was a great character developer.
His experience was a common one, the product of an America where segregation created terrible racial inequalities, while at the same time nurturing a powerful sense of African-American community.
But the Y, even though it was a segregated Y, inside the walls of that Y, all men were created equal. And you had to respect everybody. You got a chance to compete with everybody.
Like Andrew Young, Martin Luther King Jr. and many other civil rights leaders spent their early years at black YMCAs and Y camps throughout the South. Ironically, these segregated Ys helped nurture the movement that would destroy legal segregation, transforming America and the Y itself in the process.
A new philosophy was born of the Negro struggle.
From its inception, the YMCA reflected the problems and paradoxes of race in America. Denied access to white institutions, black Americans were forced to create their own, including YMCAs. The first of these so-called colored Ys was established in 1853 by Anthony Bowen, a former slave in Washington, D.C.
These very early YMCA efforts by African Americans, even the ones that emerged in the aftermath of the Civil War, some of those were very short-lived. They consisted of gatherings in the living rooms, maybe of one individual.
It wasn't until 1890 that the YMCA hired its first secretary in charge of colored work, 27-year-old William Hunton. Though the colored Ys remained separate and unequal, Hunton and his associate, Jesse Moreland, invigorated the Y's role in African-American communities around the country. Like many blacks at the time, Moreland and Hunton took an accommodationist approach to segregation. They felt that earning the respect of whites would in time earn them equality as well.
African Americans in the YMCA said, what we need to do is we need to stay within the system and not challenge segregation in the YMCA. However, we can use the system to which we've accommodated in order to train young men to become the future leaders of our race.
Their efforts were given a boost by a Jewish businessman and philanthropist named Julius Rosenwald. Rosenwald had amassed a fortune as the president of Sears Roebuck and Company. Starting in 1910, Rosenwald offered matching funds to the Black Ys, mobilizing black communities across the nation to raise money for new buildings like this one in Chicago.
Julius Rosenwald is a Jewish white man who gives to a black Christian cause. And in part it was because Julius Rosenwald had experienced anti-Semitism.
With Rosenwald's help, 24 new black Ys were built over the next 10 years. By mid-century, there were nearly 100 around the country. In 1946, the National YMCA began unofficially urging local affiliates to desegregate. Yet the way the Y was structured at the time, there was little the national office could do to force white Southern branches to obey. Within the walls of the Black Ys, however, a new generation of leaders was coming of age.
The Y was one of the very important institutions in the foundation of the Civil Rights Movement, because it was the place where potential leaders developed skills.
At the Butler Street Y in Atlanta, young black Southerners like Martin Luther King Jr., Ralph Abernathy, and Andrew Young could congregate, free from the limitations of a society that treated them as second-class citizens.
You could say anything in the Y. Speech was not censored in the Y. People could meet black and white together in the Y.
In the early years of the Civil Rights Movement, Black Y sometimes played host to planning sessions for sit-ins and other protests. But as black churches took the lead in the fight against segregation, the Black Ys faded into the background.
The Y was sort of a hidden hand. The Y never made pronouncements. The Y didn't lead marches, but everybody who led the marches was trained in the Y.
For Andrew Young and other black leaders, the Y remained a safe haven in a tumultuous era.
That was our family time. Whenever we were home together, one of the things that Dr. King would always suggest is, why don't we go to the Y for a family night swim?
It would take more than a decade of struggle, but as landmarks like the Civil Rights Act became law, segregation gradually fell by the wayside. By the mid-60s, the social revolution the Y helped nurture finally forced the Y itself to change. In 1967, after more than a century of tacitly accepted racial separation, the National Board formally banned discrimination on the basis of race. These shifts were just the beginning of a much broader transformation in how Americans lived their lives. In time, a changing society, along with one infuriatingly catchy song, would challenge the Y to redefine its role and remake its image. America's Haven, the YMCA at 150, will continue in a moment. In 1978, the Village People, a campy disco act made up of 6 costumed singers, were at the height of their career. They were looking for one more song to complete their new album, Cruisin', when the group's French-born producer had a brainstorm.
He returned to the studio, and he was excited about initials on the side of a building that he saw. And he asked us, in his French accent, "Cherise, qu'est-ce que c'est YMCA?" Now, we had never heard that, and we asked him, what is that? And he said, YMCA. And so we told him, it means Young Men's Christian Association. And he said, great, we're gonna do a song. We looked at each other like, yeah, right. And immediately he just went, young man, da 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 da. And right there, they wrote it in 10 minutes.
The song was released as a single that October and instantly became a top 10 hit. On January 6, 1979, the Village People appeared on Dick Clark's American Bandstand.
Before we did the show, Dick Clark said to us, I have a surprise for you guys. The dancers on American Bandstand showed us the arm movements, YMCA. So we incorporated it in the show.
The spur-of-the-moment moves became a national dance craze. Yet for the YMCA itself, the attention was not entirely welcome. The song exposed a subculture of the Y that most people didn't even know existed. Throughout its history, the Y had offered shelter and guidance for young men. In doing so, it had inadvertently provided a safe haven for homosexual men to meet, discreetly. On the surface, the lyrics of YMCA sounded like an innocent celebration of the Y's services. But to those who understood the double entendres of their previous hits, the lyrics were interpreted as an expression of the Y's covert history. Worried about the song's impact on its image, the National YMCA considered trying to block its release.
Suddenly there was a song out there capitalizing on the name. And so, you know, they threatened with, like, you have to stop, we don't want you to do this.
In the end, the Y backed down, and the song proved far more durable than the controversy. Over the next 2 decades, it would become a perennial favorite at ballparks, weddings, and retro nightclubs, making the Y a fixture on the pop culture landscape.
It's essentially worth $1 bazillion of brand recognition for the YMCA, and its name is in every sports stadium. Every little kid can do the YMCA. It's a phenomenal marketing tool for the YMCA's mission.
Even before the village people pushed it into the spotlight, the YMCA was facing a profound challenge from a changing America. By the mid-1970s, American cities were rapidly losing population to the suburbs. As the needs of the communities were shifting, memberships and funding in YMCA facilities in larger cities were decreasing.
The suburban YMCAs seemed to have all the money, they had the membership, they were doing very well indeed. The urban YMCAs, on the other hand, many of them were declining very quickly.
In response, they accelerated a process the Y had started in the wake of World War II, shifting their primary focus from the needs of young men to the needs of families.
They set up daycare centers, they set up drug rehab programs, they opened up their basketball courts to urban youth, they open up their pools to urban youth. They really do become, I think, community centers for the inner city.
Welcome to the New City Y, just northwest of downtown Chicago. Built in 1981, it was specifically created to serve 2 very different urban communities. Worlds that border one another, but whose people rarely mix. Only a block to the north is the mostly white upper-middle-class neighborhood of Lincoln Park. From the time New City opened, members from this part of town have sought out the Y's traditional offerings. For example, swimming and athletics. Much closer to the Y, however, is Cabrini Green, the predominantly black public housing project that has long been a national symbol of urban despair. Cabrini residents have turned to New City as a safe haven, a place not just to play sports, but also to find essential family services like job training and affordable child care.
I can do it too. Do a man face.
39-year-old single mother Rosalba Cruz is one New City member who has taken advantage of this. When her daughter Alexa was born in 1991, Rosalba expected to have a close-knit community of friends and relatives available to help take care of her. But she quickly found raising a child much different in Chicago than in her native Mexico.
In our country, is like everybody helps everybody, and we are close always. When I moved here, I found out that everybody works. Most of the time, kids are alone.
In 1994, Rosalba heard about the daycare center at the New City Y. With 3-year-old Alexa in tow, she nervously stopped by one day to check it out.
They hardly could understand my broken English, but they understood what I want. And they make me feel like they care for my baby, even though they couldn't talk so well with me.
Alexa, now 9, has thrived at New City. She's currently a member of the swim team there. She also gets tutored once a week in math, a subject in which she's gone from getting an F to getting the best grade in her 5th grade class. Meanwhile, thanks to the programs at New City, Alexa's mother has had the time to return to college to get a degree in social work.
I couldn't really say what my life would be without the Y. It's part of my life, part of my daughter's life. Having the YMCA in the place it is has been a great thing.
From daycare centers to gymnastics, from computer classes to water aerobics. The American YMCA has certainly taken on a new look since Thomas Sullivan founded it 150 years ago. An organization that was once devoted to helping white Protestant men now serves nearly 18 million men, women, boys, and girls of every race and religion.
It's still one of the basic institutions in American life that affirms and protects the American family.
It creates places where young people can come into contact with mentors who give them encouragement to allow their spirits to soar and to develop the skills that otherwise might not have been developed had they not had it started at the YMCA.
Clearly, the YMCA is a very dynamic organization that changes with the times successfully. I have no doubt that it will continue to do so, that it will continue to change along with America, and by so changing, remain a very important part of the American social scene.
This program is funded with a grant from the Pepsi-Cola Company.